Hi, everyone. Happy Thursday. Sorry, I am running super late behind. I had to go and drop off some food that I cooked for my son's football team. And if you know, you know. But I had to go do that really quick. So here I am. Let's hop right into it. For those who don't know me, my name is Tashina, and I'm an executive leadership and team coach. And I help the teams and the leaders who lead them collaborate better, heal from conflict, and build systems that actually work without the drama. And today we're going to be talking about boundaries. Boundaries, y'all. I know there's a lot of y'all. This is probably maybe a little bit of a touchy subject, but um, we're going to talk about it. And we're not talking about just the personal kind of boundaries, but the systemic kind of boundaries, like things that happen in your workplace. Because what I've seen again and again is that when systems lack clear boundaries, people start setting unhealthy ones of their own. And it shows up like avoidance, silence, burnout, things like that. Okay. Um, so today is day 19 of in the 30 days of systems that make teams work series. And today we're talking about why boundaries are a form of trust, not control, why humans often resist boundaries because we don't have a good, kind of a relationship with them. How unclear systems actually create confusion and burnout, and how to design team systems that protect your energy, your time, your stress levels, and your trust. Okay. So, boundaries are not about control, they go back to what human beings need. As you recall, I talked about some of the basic human needs yesterday, but these three are the things that people, the human beings, us, really want to feel. We want to feel safe, where we know what's okay and what's not. We want to have our own autonomy. Autonomy is super important to us because we want to have our own agency over our time and our energy. We don't want to feel like we're being forced into anything. And we want to be clear. Like people want to know what's expected from them and what they can expect from other people. That's how we ensure our safety, our security, our survival. And when systems don't provide structure around those type of needs, people start to overcommit, they overextend themselves, they function like they do more than what's necessary just so that they can feel secure. Boundaries create a safety net. This safety net is going to allow people to kind of relax and say, I already know what's expected of me. I already know what this person likes or doesn't like. I already know what work I'm supposed to do, what work I'm not supposed to do. And it just creates a safety net, right? So there's no misunderstandings. People are very clear. And it also makes collaboration happen better on teams because when you're collaborating, that's when a lot of different personalities come into play. That's when you start to realize the pressure people have with work and things like that. And so we want to make sure that we set boundaries, not with just each other, but within our systems as leaders. Okay. Share this live if this is something that you know somebody needs to hear. Share the live, share the live. Okay. We're talking about boundaries today. So, what I know about most people that I've worked with is that even though they know they need to put up boundaries, they are going to resist them. They it just happens all the time, right? Even myself, like in certain contexts with certain people, I resist boundaries, whether it's conscious or not. I resist the boundaries. And usually that resistance has to do with some level of conditioning that has happened. So, from a young age, we are all taught in some form or fashion that our worth is tied to doing, to pleasing, and to performing. So, we get an allowance because we cleaned up. We are, told that we're so helpful. And so we get something in rewards for that. It's almost like when you're training a dog. Um, when you're teaching them how to, I know training my little being, when I'm training her, or where, I'm not going to even say me because let's be honest, I'm not really the one that does that. But when she's being trained, like every time she does something good, she gets a treat, right? Meaning if she pleases us, she gets a treat. My kids, if they do something like get good grades, clean up, something like that, they get a treat, right? So we're conditioned to be that way. That's how we've been conditioned in our society. And so when somebody sets a boundary, our nervous system goes out of whack, and it often reads it as like you're being rejected, this is a punishment, or unconsciously, I don't belong here. Unconsciously, we start to go there. And we've learned to associate yes with love and safety, and no with conflict and danger. And that's not really a good place to be, because no could also be for your safety, right? So boundaries can feel threatening to both the giver, the person who is saying, this is my boundary. And it may be threatening because they may feel like if I set this limit, people are going to think that I don't like them. I don't care about them. I don't want to be around them. Okay. But it's also threatening to the receiver, the person who is at the other end of getting the boundary. And you may start to think, well, if I set this limit, maybe they don't care about me as much. Maybe I don't matter as much, right? This is a basic human response. It's basic. This is what happens. Unconsciously, we get into our reactive, and this is what happens. Because boundaries challenge a fear that we have of being left out, of disappointing others, or just not being accepted. And so, what you'll see in different organizations and with different people is conflict avoidance, where we avoid having any type of confrontation or pushing back. You'll see it as overworking, where we do more and more and more just to please so that we're accepted, or we will just write out avoid. So we're going to just disengage. We're going to go into our little, side, corner of the office, or in our little hole, in our, in our own comfort, just so that we can feel safe. So it shows up this way. Now, I want to bring in two people whose work has really shaped how I think about boundaries. The first person is Rachel Rodgers. So Rachel Rodgers is a business coach. She's the CEO of Hello 7, and she's the author of We Should All Be Millionaires. And she teaches women, people of color, and LGBTQIA plus folks how to build wealth, how to set standards, and how to reclaim their time back. And she calls boundaries an act of self-trust. If you can set a boundary, that means you trust yourself, right? And she says every time you say no to something that drains you, you open up the space to say yes to something that fills you up, that builds you up. So tangibly in business, what this can mean is that we are making trade-off decisions. We're making trade-off decisions and being clear about them in order to protect our own productivity. And that's the kind of leadership we need. We need leadership that has boundaries, that's rooted in I believe in myself and I trust myself. I have self trust. That's the type of boundaries that you should be setting as a leader. And then there's Nedra Glover Tawwab. I'm not sure how to pronounce her last name, but Nedra Glover Tawwab. She's a licensed therapist, and she's the author of Set Boundaries, Find Peace and Drama Free. And she also has a workbook to go with the Set Boundaries. And she reminds us that boundaries are how we teach others to be in relationship with us. And this is something that I do often with when I do design alliances at the very beginning of team sessions, pair sessions, like anything like that, where I'm like, how do we want to be in relationship with each other? Because that is the moment where we are saying, this is the boundary that I have for this relationship. This is how I want things to be. Now, her work connects boundaries to emotional clarity. She says that a lack of boundaries invites chaos, invites resentment, invites all this stuff that you really don't want to happen. But in setting them, that's how we create peace. That's how we create respect in our relationships, including the relationships at work. So when you bring both of their perspectives together, Rachel, Rodgers, and Nedra, what you find is that Rachel's focused on self trust and Nedra's focused on relational or emotional clarity. You get the foundation for systems that truly protect people. So you bring both of those together. Now people feel more protected because boundaries at their best are where trust and respect meet together. They come together, and now you have a place of belonging, a place where people feel safe. That's what you want. And if we have systems, and these systems are rooted in trust and care and equity, we have to design for boundaries. We can't just hope for them. So if you watched yesterday where I talked a lot about recognition, the day before I talked a lot about equity. I don't know if it was the day before, but I've talked about equity. And what happens is that if you want to create these spaces, you have to teach people how to treat you. And the way to treat people how to treat you is through boundaries. Okay. Now, I don't want you to think boundaries are selfish, because they are not selfish. They are what makes us trust one another and not feel surprised by someone's reactions or preferences. So let's just put it out on the table. You tell me what you like, I tell you what I like. You tell me what you don't like, I tell you what I don't like. It's kind of like dating for the first time, or somebody who's always dating. You're always learning and you're saying, this is my expectations. This is what I like. This is what I don't like. Right? When you have a system that has no boundaries, people are going to be burnt out because they're always trying to guess, they're making assumptions, they're trying to figure it out. And all of that mental gymnastics that's happening is going to burn them out. It just is. But a system that's too rigid, where there's too many boundaries, people are going to start to feel isolated. Again, that's probably going to burn them out as well, because now they're like, oh my God, I can't do anything. Again, the mental gymnastics is happening in that relationship. So, with boundaries, the goal is not to control anyone, it's to balance, it's to create a balance, is to create a structure that protects people while leaving room for people to have some level of freedom and flow. The more that I know what I can and cannot do, the more I know my expectations, the more freedom I have in all the other things that I'm able to do, all the other things that are acceptable. So we just have to be clear about what boundaries are. Okay. They are not to be based on control. They are to build the type of trusting system and environment that we really want. Now, I want to name something that often gets confused in our culture, in our society, especially in workplaces and in online spaces. We have started to mistake boundaries for canceling people, cancel culture. And I want you to know that these are not the same thing. Okay. Because typically what people are thinking is like, when I have a boundary, that means I'm cutting them off if they do it. I'm telling them that's enough. I'm telling them I'm not fooling with them when I have a boundary. But we don't want to cancel people. Okay. They're culture and boundaries are not the same thing, because canceling is about disconnection. It's about punishment. I'm going to make you, you're going to see how it's going to be because you cross that boundary. That's about punishment. But boundaries are being clear on what's acceptable or not, and having some level of accountability. This is the accountability that, that I have to uphold, or I have to have you, adhere to, based on, the boundaries that are set, right? When we cancel somebody, we're removing them from the team, from the system, from the environment. Like, you're just out of here. That's what happens when we cancel somebody. But when we set boundaries, we're designing an entire system that People again know what is expected of them. They know how to move. They know what's good and what's not. They know, right? Which is why boundaries have to have some level of specificity. You can't just guess what the boundaries are, because if people are guessing and trying to figure it out, mental gymnastics. Now I'm trying to figure it out and I'm tired, I'm exhausted. I don't know what's safe and what's not. I don't feel safe. That's what happens. Boundaries tell us that a certain behavior isn't okay, but you are still part of this community and we're going to work through it with you. But cancel culture, on the other hand, it skips the entire repair process. Like, we're not going to even talk about it. You're just deuces, you're out of here. Like, we have no time for any more conversation. Okay. It removes discomfort of having to like work with the conflict, work with the tension. And you're just like, okay, I'm just not, I'm going to, sweep it under the rug. I'm going to go on and I'm going to do my thing. You don't even try to work through it. Okay. So that's what happens with cancel culture. The reason why I'm sharing this is because this matters. If you are a leader, you're stepping into leadership. If you even a big L or little L leadership, if you heard my explanation about that, big L leadership is title, little L leadership is like anybody is a leader. Okay? I believe anybody is a leader, but for the purposes of our workplace, there are people with formal titles who we call leaders, and so I just want to make that clear, okay? This matters for all leadership, big L and little L. Okay? Because the leaders who equate boundaries with rejection avoid them altogether. So if you are a leader and you're like, if someone holds a boundary, then that's it, right? I feel rejected. I feel like I don't belong. And then they start feeling resentment underneath the surface. And then they start treating people a certain way because of that resentment, right? So as a leader, can you reframe? I'm trying to help you today, reframe what boundaries are. Healthy systems, healthy teams don't cancel people for making mistakes. Have you ever been, and a lot of this happens actually, been on a team or been in an organization where when you make a mistake, that's it. All your chances of promotion, all your chances of, being able to do something else or do it over again or whatever is out the door. That is cancel culture. That's an example. Okay. So if you're in a healthy system and you are really showing up with care and you really are concerned about people, you are creating boundaries that actually build the trust. You create boundaries that have repair in it. So you're like, this is a boundary, and we have methods of how we repair, how we come together, how we come together and say, okay, my bad, this is what I do. I realize the impact that this had on you. This is the impact that you had, that your behavior had on me. And there's just clear lines that help people grow and stay accountable. And that's what we want. This is what mature leadership looks like. It's not perfection, but it is a commitment to being clear, to seeking repair, and to continue the relationship. That's what you want. Okay. Type in the chat if you are someone who is dealing with any level of boundaries, you're trying to make boundaries, you're scared of boundaries. Type it in the chat. I would love to coach you while we're on the call, and just tell me what do you feel? How do you feel about boundaries? Okay. And share this live with others as well. So, the other thing about boundaries is that at work specifically, it's not personal. It's not personal. Like, we're all here to work, we're all here to do a job. It's not personal. They happen when systems make boundaries unsafe or unclear. That's when you start to feel it's more personal, right? And so, what that looks like is in a system that doesn't have clear boundaries, you will see there's no clear priorities. Everything feels urgent. Everything. Because you don't have boundaries of people's time. You don't really care about people's time. And so everything is going to feel like it's urgent. The other thing is undefined roles. If you are somebody that's working on a team, you're like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do or what this person is supposed to do. I am not clear. That means that people are going to overstep or drop the ball, and now there is a crossing over of a boundary, because now you in my lane and you shouldn't even be in my lane. But that's because there's no clear roles. Or the always on culture. What I mean by that is like you're always on, you're always working, you're always on the computer, you're always ready for by phone, you're always ready to work, you're coming early, stay late. It's because we've been taught that rest is not a privilege. Rest is a privilege, and rest should be like something that you have to earn. It's like if you're resting, that is not okay, right? That's what it looks like. The other thing it looks like is that it's unspoken expectation. So people start to assume things. That's how you know when a system doesn't have clear boundaries. And when leaders start to reward those people who are overworking, answering late night emails, they go above and beyond at their own personal cost, the system is sending a message that you being tired and you overworking means you're excellent. So the other person who's like, I got kids at home, I have a husband or wife at home, I have, a parent that I have to take care of, that's being looked at as being lazy or not committed. But that's not the case. That's not leadership. That means that your system is a system of burnout and you're rewarding burnout. So if your system is telling you that well-being matters and we care about you, but they don't model it where you don't get breaks, you don't get time to recover, you don't get time, you can't put up a boundary and say, you know what, I'm not taking calls. Even if I eat at my desk, I'm not taking any calls. And they have a problem with that, that is mixed messaging. If they really care about your well-being, boundaries are not optional. We have to create them. It can look like the design alliance, it can look like what are our working norms, it could look like setting agreements, it could look like project based to project based, whatever it is. Create your boundaries. You don't have to say these are boundaries. You can say, okay, how do we want to be in relationship with each other? Let's talk about it before we hop in and we start working with each other. It can be as simple as that. So, to create those boundaries, you need both very specific, clear behavioral things. Like you need to say that very explicitly. Don't leave anything out, just be you. And then you also need to show up with care. Okay. Still caring about the person, which means that you're going to create some repair process in that, because I guarantee repair is going to have to happen when you're creating boundaries. So here are, I got 3 ways or 4 ways that you can do this. First of all, get clear on your roles and responsibilities and the expectations. So be clear with your team what their role is, what's in scope, what's not, and what they're expected to do. Be very clear about that. Okay. If you want your team to be collaborative and to work well together and to be aligned, the boundaries are going to help with that, because everybody is going to know where they start, where they end, where they start holding the baton and where they pass it along. They're going to know that. So be clear about the roles and responsibilities and expectations. The other thing is set in time that, or set in moments where people can have time to restore, time to get back their energy, time to protect their time. So, like, if people need heads down time, give them that heads down time, especially after coming out of a meeting. It's probably one of the most critical moments is after a meeting, when you need the heads down time to actually think about what just happened. I talked about this in one of my podcast episodes, and you can go find it, where I talked a lot about multitasking. And I talked about how multitasking is not really good. And when we try to move from one thing to the next, we actually spend more time trying to remember what happened later. And we try, like, there's just so much confusion. And so really between meetings, we need at least 10 to 15 minutes just to kind of brain dump and say, okay, this is what's going on, right? And so you want to give people that time in between, right? You also want to have days where it's meeting free blocks. I remember during the pandemic, the company that I just came from, when I used to work at Genentech, what they used to do is like afternoons on Monday, no meetings, or there was always a meeting block in the middle for lunches, or Fridays, no meetings. Like it was company wide, right? Because protecting our time and our energy was very important, right? And so I've actually continued that process to this day where I have different blocks of time on my calendar for no meetings. You also want to set different communication norms. So you want to say, like, we're going to communicate this type of information by text, this type of information by Slack, this type of information by phone, this type of information face to face. Like, be clear on what your communication norms are so that people understand what they need to be responding to. You want a type of process where people feel like they trust you to manage your own energy, and that they don't need to micromanage you and have meetings all day and just fill up your space. Like, show me that you care. Okay. So that's another way you could do it. The other thing is make boundaries a leadership skill that you're practicing. So oftentimes we get these blanket skills that, that we have on our like capabilities and, job description and all these things that we have to do. We also need to make boundary setting a skill, a practice, because as a leader, you go first. You role model what's happening. When you end your meetings on time, when you decline unnecessary requests, or you take rest seriously, you normalize, self trust. You normalize self respect. You normalize, trusting in others. You normalize and you create that type of culture. As Rachel Rodgers would say, she's like, your boundaries teach people how to treat you. And that's also true for teams. Your system teaches people what's safe, what's urgent, and what's valued in your organization. And so you want to make that clear. And the last thing is feedback. I talked about feedback a couple of days ago on my live, and I talked about feedback and feedback loops and what they are. I also talked about this on day one. Feedback loops are so important because they help you to revisit boundaries. It helps you to check in and see if these are the right boundaries, if they're still working for you, because boundaries aren't fixed. Boundaries will evolve. Maybe when you first meet somebody, you don't want to kiss them. But after a while, you're like, bet, I want to kiss. Right? I'm not saying that in the workplace, but I'm trying to give you a tangible example of like how it evolves. And so at first they may be a little bit less friendly or a little bit less like open, but as time goes on, as you start to get to know the person or the team or the people, as you start to really feel like, there's some level of trust, they start to evolve. So you want to create some regular type of check-ins where people can say what's working or what's too much or what needs adjusting. And Nedra Glover Tawwab says this in her book, that this is the maintenance work. So there's always maintenance happening when it comes to boundary setting, because she says boundaries aren't one and done. They require upkeep. They require conversation. They require just work to continue to come back to. Okay. So that's what you want to do. Those are the 4 things that you want to do. So make sure you're clear on roles and responsibilities and expectations. Set up space for you to be able to protect your energy and your time. Model the boundaries as a leadership skill, as if you're a leader, and then build feedback loops so that you're always making sure that you're doing the maintenance to make sure that everything is a-okay. Okay. So Um, as an example, I just want to give you something tangible. I'm working with a leader who has been struggling to say no and struggling to set boundaries with her team. She's been taking on everything by herself. She's been trying to protect her team. And what's happening is she's getting exhausted. She was exhausted. Her team felt kind of disempowered. And so people were kind of like, well, what is she doing? And what is he doing? And what are they doing? And I should be able to do this. And they're doing that. Like, it was a lot of tension happening. So, what we did together is we just went down first. What was her relationship with boundaries? How did she see boundaries as a leader? What has she been shaped to believe? And then we got to very practical ways to start to role model and start to embed these things into her team. And so we created clear decision making maps or ownership or like a it was like a light framework. It wasn't like super big or super, it wasn't rigid, but we made clear decision making things so people would know what their role was and expectations of them. We also made sure that there were moments for real communication and feedback because that was important. And then we looked at capacity together. And the reason why we looked at capacity is because some people have more capacity than others. And so we want to make people feel like there's boundaries, or there's an ability to feel empowered to do more if they want to, but not give more to people who are like, I don't have that much capacity. And so we really looked at capacity building and tracking that capacity for every individual. And so we weren't just looking at operational ways of creating boundaries, but we were looking at like what are the emotions that people feel, and because these things are emotional. It does feel personal. It does feel like a threat sometimes. And so we want to be clear. But after we started doing all of this, and it was co-created. So it was she and I were able to co-create it together, and then we took it to the team, and the team was able to kind of share their input and co-create with us as well. And that just brought more aliveness on this team. The team started speaking up more. They trusted her more. And it just felt like a well run engine. Like the team was all together, right? And I share this with you because I want you to believe that boundaries are not going to distance people. It's not going to make people further apart. It's going to help people have clear definitions about who they are and how they belong in this system. Okay. So that's what we want. Okay. We want a place where there's safety. That's safe when you know who you are and what's good for you, right? That's safety. Okay. So this week, as a reflection, I always have a reflection at the end of these. This is what I want you to ask yourself. Where in your system are boundaries unclear or inconsistent? How do you personally resist boundaries? How are you resisting either yours or others? Like what does that look like? And ask yourself why? Why do I resist this? And then what's one boundary you can design or you can model this week that will show people that you care and that they can trust you? Maybe it's in meeting blocks. Okay. What's one boundary? Okay. Boundaries are agreements. I want to say that again. Boundaries are agreements. It's not a barrier. It's not going to create more distance. It actually brings people further closer together because they know what's expected of them. Okay. Okay. So, in closing, boundaries are the clearest forms of leadership. So, if you're like, I need to learn some leadership skills, what are ways that I do this? Creating boundaries. Again, you don't have to call it boundaries in the workplace. You know what it is, but you don't have to call it that. It could be design alliance, it could be agreements, it could be setting expectations, it could be clear roles and responsibilities. These are the boundaries that you are creating. Okay. And if your team feels stretched thin or they are over it, don't start with motivation. Don't start with like, yes, like let me get you motivated, like let me give you this. No, start with boundaries. Because if they're thin or they're over it, they need some level of like relief to say, you know what? you're stretched so thin, I'm going to take some things off your plate because we did some capacity mapping. We understand your capacity levels. And so we're going to do it that way. Okay. You want to be able to protect your team. You want to be able to protect what matters most to them. And 9 times out of 10, it's their time, it's their energy, it's their stress levels, and it's whether or not they trust you. Okay. Because when people know where the lines are and what they can cross or not, they will finally relax. They will start collaborating better, and they are going to feel safe, like this is a place that they belong in your organization. Okay. So thank you for joining this live. I will be back tomorrow at 6 p.m. for the next in this series. And I don't have that written down. I forgot where I put it, but I will see you tomorrow at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. All right. Talk soon. Bye.